Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator at Murder by the Book here in Houston. Sorry about the little bit of a late start. We're having some tech issues, which we think we've sorted out. There's a little bit of a delay with Laura's camera. So if you see a little bit of lag, we think it's on our end, but we think everything is working for now. So as I mentioned, I am John. I'm the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. So before I bring out Rachel and Laura, I just want to make a couple of quick store announcement stuff. First up, we are open for browsing. So if you haven't come to see us in a while, definitely come visit us. We've got lots of great new stuff in. We have got some really good Halloween recommendations coming up and on our Instagram in the next couple of weeks. We do know that not everybody's getting out and about. So if you are still doing curbside pickup, we're happy to do that. Just give us a call. We've actually probably had more people do curbside pickup in the last 2 days than I think we have in the last couple of months. But if you would like to do that, just give us a call when you pull into the parking lot. We're always happy to run stuff out to you. Like I said, we've got lots of great stuff coming up. Saturday, McKenna is going to be on at noon for the Daggers Drawn panel. So if you're a fan of UK authors, we are going to have a bunch of them chatting with us. We just confirmed we're going to be doing an event with the best mystery and suspense stories of 2021 on October 12th. We're super excited about that. And then I'm really excited next Tuesday, we're going to be chatting with CJ Cook and Rachel Harrison about their new books. That'll be at 1 o'clock because CJ Cook is overseas. So I'm going to get us started for tonight and bring out Laura and Rachel. While we are chatting with them, if you guys have questions for either author, you can post those in the comments on Facebook or the live chat on YouTube, and we will leave time to get to those. But first, I'm going to bring out Rachel. How are you tonight, Rachel?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
So Rachel's newest release is Dangerous Ground, which just came out on August 17th. She also has a new book coming out in October, which we'll get into in a little bit. But Rachel Grant is the USA Today bestselling author of the Flashpoint series and the Evidence novels. She worked for over a decade as a professional archaeologist and mines her experience for storylines and settings, which are as diverse as excavating a cemetery underneath a historic art museum in San Francisco, surveying an economically depressed coal mining town in Kentucky, and mapping a 17th century Spanish and Dutch fort on the island of Sint Maarten in the Netherlands Antilles. In all of her travels and adventures as an archaeologist, she has found many sites and artifacts, but she's only found one true treasure, her husband, David. She lives on an island in the Pacific Northwest with her husband and children. And as I mentioned, Dangerous Ground is her newest release. And tonight we're here to celebrate the release of Laura Griffin's new book. So let's bring Laura out. How are you tonight, Laura? And it looks like we have...
Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So Rachel's newest book is, Laura's newest book is Last Seen Alone, which just came out on Tuesday. Laura is the New York Times bestselling and USA Today bestselling author of more than 25 books and novellas, and she is a 2-time RITA Award winner as well as the recipient of the Daphne du Maurier Award. So I just want to make sure that Laura can actually hear and see us before I turn this over to Rachel. So Laura, can you hear and everything okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Okay. So it seems like everything's working. There's just a little bit of a lag. So Rachel, I'm going to turn this over to you. But like I said, if you need me, I'm right behind the scenes. If things are frozen, I will pop back in. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will see you guys in just a little bit.
Hi, Laura. I'm so excited to be here talking with you tonight. Because you've been you're one of my favorite romantic suspense authors. So it's just such an honor to get to have this conversation with you. And I just wanted to let you say I absolutely loved Last Seen Alone. When I first got my copy, I was like, nope. I'm going to save that. I've got all this other work to do. And then it was like, but you need to read this. This is work. And I let that demon win, and and I loved every minute.
That happens.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I just finished Dangerous Ground as well, and I love. Some people don't like to read within the genre that they write, but I actually enjoy reading suspense, romantic suspense, thrillers. So I kind of read. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like when I'm writing, I find it very hard to read in the genre, and then I'll be reading other things. But when I'm taking a break, it's my favorite thing to escape into. And I do a lot of audiobooks because I don't have as much reading time as I would like. So I've actually listened to most of your books in audio.
Oh, wow. That's great. Thank you.
So I wanted to ask.
Question for you.
Okay. Go ahead.
My question was, have you ever visited the part of Alaska you had set your story in?
I haven't been to the Aleutian Islands. I have been to the Alaskan mainland. I actually went there because I'd written a book set in Alaska, and it totally needed work. It wasn't gelling, and so I was like, I think this is a perfect excuse to go to Alaska for a week. So I did do that, and that was years ago. But the reason I chose the Aleutians for the setting of this book was because my husband is also an archaeologist, and he works for the Navy. In fact, his job is quite similar to Fiona's job in Dangerous Ground, like a whole lot alike. And a few years ago, he was supposed to go to Adak Island for a project for the Navy. And the minute he mentioned it, I was like, ooh, maybe I should set a book there. And then he didn't get to go. And I was like, but I'm still setting a book there. So that was really it. It was like, once I started learning about the Aleutians and the World War II history there, and the just everything, it was I knew I had to write a book there.
Well, that's one of the things that I found really fascinating about your story was the intersection of the national defense project going on and the archaeology that was happening. I didn't really ever think about the intersection thing, but it made for a really interesting plot. So
thank you. Yeah. So
added to the suspense.
My husband has worked for the Department of Defense for over 20 years now as an archaeologist. He also worked for a while, even before this 20 years that he's been working for the Department of Defense. He also spent 2 years working for Naval History and Heritage Command in Washington, D.C., working for the Navy's underwater archaeologist. And so I have a very unique perspective on how much the U.S. military and archaeology intersect, which is a lot. And so that's actually been something I've really enjoyed incorporating into my books, because you're not the only person who didn't realize that there's a really strong connection between cultural history, prehistory, and what the Department of Defense does all over the world. Yeah.
Well, so that kind of leads to your next book in the series. Is there going to be an underwater archaeology element to the next one that's coming out?
There is. It's set in the Caribbean, and so I have to have some underwater archaeology there. It isn't military related. Yeah. Fiona gets a job. She takes a leave of absence from her Navy job, and she's on. It's a fictional island, Ruby Island, which is part of the Commonwealth of Dominica in the Caribbean, and she's doing a survey, and she's actually doing the land survey because she's done underwater archaeology, but she doesn't have a degree in it. That's not her specialty, and so she brings in a friend of hers who is a Jamaican woman underwater archaeologist, and so he's working on mapping outside the fort. So that one of the fun things that I get to incorporate in this book is that I actually worked recording a Spanish and Dutch fort in the Caribbean about 20 years ago. I did a project, and so I finally get to use that project in a book. I was so excited. Wow. Yeah. So. Well, I was
excited to read the description of the story because I found.
Oh, keep going. Sorry.
Well, it just sounded like there was going to be an underwater element to it, and I thought that was fascinating. So I can't wait to read the next one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it comes out January 4th, almost at 3rd, January 4th. And it's really fun to get to bring the characters back together. 9 months have passed. And Fiona and Dean find themselves together. It's not planned on the island, but they haven't actually seen or talked to each other in the previous 9 months. So the reader doesn't miss anything of their relationship development, which was pretty fun. This is a new kind of thing for me to write, where the romance arc is playing out over multiple books. I've never done that before. So I was having a lot of fun with that. But I wanted to talk about, so your setting, and this book was set in Austin, which I believe is where you live. So it's, setting it close to home. But and I know that you've set a lot of your books in Texas, and I imagine that Texas, I mean, it's just so massive that you just never run out of like settings and ideas and places. And I'm curious, and this is actually sort of, it's a question that, for you, what comes first? I mean, like, are you looking at, setting, plot, character? What is the first element that you need to build the story on?
For me, it's usually character. I usually start with an idea. Because I write suspense, I usually start with a suspense-related idea. It might be a profession that I want the character to have, like whether it's a DNA specialist or an investigator. In the case of Last Seen Alone, the heroine is a victims' rights attorney, and she fights for victims of online harassment, revenge porn, sextortion. And so she, because she's an attorney and she's practicing law in Austin, that kind of knew what my set was going to be. And so I've just kind of set the story right in the middle of downtown Austin. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I had a lot of fun with the Austin setting.
I really loved Lee as a character, the way that she was such an advocate for her clients. I mean, because these are women who have really been through something, and usually there's nobody who's able to offer them help or relief or any kind of justice. And I just really appreciated her. Is there a facet of her of that? Was it the type of law that she practices that spoke to you first, or is that what you were building her character on? I'm curious.
Actually, I started my career in journalism, and so a lot of my story ideas come from news articles that I've read, and that was the case with this book also. So I had read a news article about a young woman, and I want to say she was a teenager, like maybe an 18-year-old or so, who had been the victim of revenge porn, and it had really just turned her life upside down. Mm. And my heart just went out to this girl in the story. And then another person was mentioned in the story was her attorney who was representing her, and how she was kind of fighting to get justice for this girl. And I just thought that would be an amazing character. And so I started reading up on the topic and reading up about what the lawyers can do for their clients that are victims of this. And the character just, she had to be passionate, and in the story you'll see there's things in her backstory that kind of led her into this specialty area. So yeah, that's just kind of how it came about.
You did an amazing job with her, because I really, I can hear that, saying that you read this and you were like, oh, that would be, because you did, you really brought her to life. And I actually thought, I loved how that really worked really well with the conflict between her and Brandon. I actually wrote the names down because I'm terrible remembering names. With conflict with Brandon, because of course, she points out to him very early on that she's actually ideally suited to help him investigate, because she knows, she's especially skilled with the type of man that they could be dealing with if the victim was a victim of the kind of cases that she handles, which is likely because the woman did end up hiring her. And so she points out that I know these men. I know what they do. I know, and she's right. She can really help him, and of course he doesn't want her to help. And they're both right. They're not both wrong, and I love that kind of conflict when it just works really well. Yeah. It's
there's also the complication of attorney-client privilege. So there are times in this story where she kind of puts up a roadblock and says, I can't tell you that, which is very intense. It kind of goes back and forth. The conflict just kind of builds.
Yeah. Well, it's a great both romance conflict and suspense conflict because it works both sides perfectly well, and yet you can see them drawing together, and the kind of books you write, which you do so well, is you really do an excellent job of writing a suspense heavy story where the hero and the heroine are actually apart a fair amount of the time, but you find ways to bring them together and interact in logical, meaningful ways. And I appreciate that so much. It is not easy. And I imagine it gives you fits at times.
Yeah, it is challenging, as you know.
Looks like my cat might be coming in. We'll see if she stays. I'll bring her up to say hi.
So, Rachel, I had a question for you. When did you start writing fiction and switch out of the archaeology job? How did that come about?
I always wanted to be a writer. In fact, I actually studied archaeology because I decided that it would give me something to write about someday. And so I worked for 10 years in the field, and I'm not an academic archaeologist. I never worked at a museum. I worked in the private sector in a field known as cultural resources management. And my husband also, he does have a master's degree. I don't. He has a master's degree in nautical archaeology from Texas A&M University, by the way. And so he works at a higher level than I did, but he and I both worked doing CRM together all over the Pacific Northwest, and we were working for different companies. We actually really very rarely worked together, but then in DC, and I was always planning on someday I'm going to quit and write a book, and I would be out there in the field and I'd be shaking a screen and sorting quarter-inch material and bored out of my mind because there's no site for miles, but we're going through it to make sure there's no site here. And I'd be writing, like, how could I put this in a story? What, how can I use this in a book? And so then when my daughter was 2 years old, we moved to Hawaii for 3 years because my husband got a job with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Honolulu district. And so when we made the plan to move, I told him, I said, okay, I've run the numbers and I think that we can afford for me to quit my job. So that I can stay home with our daughter. I want to have another child, and I'm going to write a book. And that was, and he was like, okay. I mean, he wanted me to be able to quit my job too, because working in the same field and then me working in Hawaii, it would have been very difficult. So it was like the perfect plan. My nefarious scheme finally came true. So we moved to Hawaii. I wrote a book. I had another child. And then we came back. We came back January of 2005, and I had a first draft of my first novel written. I had an 18-month-old and a 5-year-old. And so that was how the journey started.
Wow. Things, because it's really hard to write with distractions, and I can't think of anything more distracting than a little baby.
Yeah, it helped that I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, it was my first book, and I was that person who I was like, well, I won't take any writing classes or figure anything out until after I've written a book, because then and I wasn't wrong. It worked for me, for my process. It was better for me to have something and then look at how I was supposed to do it, and realize, oh wait, I need to put a goal in that scene, and then revise. I revised the heck out of that book. I rewrote it multiple times. I had a mentor who helped me quite a bit, and that book is published. And it actually came out in publishable form after all of that. And so I learned a lot. And but yeah, so it wasn't until my kids were in school that I stopped being able to write with distractions. Now I can't have any distraction at all. But you know, when they were little, I could do it. So when did you transition from
writing when my kids were little as well?
Oh, so did you do a slow transition from journalism to writing, or was it just a cold break?
I was a journalist initially. I worked at a paper in Nashville, Tennessee, and then I worked in the suburbs of Chicago where we moved. And by the time we got back to Texas, we were ready to start a family, and so we did. And I started writing fiction when I was home with my little ones, and you know, it turned out to be a great you know, career for that, because you know, your time comes in these little chunks where you can sit down for a few hours maybe when the kids are doing something else, or maybe they're preschool. And so that's how the first few books came. You know, I would write while they were in preschool or while they were napping, and I just kind of, it was a slow pace of work than I do now, but you kind of stuck with it. And I had a goal in mind that I wanted to try and get something published by the time my second one was in kindergarten. And if not, I was going to try and go back to my previous job. But luckily, I got something published by that point, so I was ready to stick with it. So I've been doing it ever since.
That's fantastic. And what year were you first published?
Oh, I think it was 2007. 2007.
Okay. I was in RWA then. That was actually the first RWA. No, the first one I went to was in 2006, because I'd come back from Hawaii in 2005 and I joined and everything. And so yeah, but I didn't publish until 2013. My journey was longer. But
well, we've seen a lot of changes in the industry in that short time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's been quite a ride. Like, I wouldn't even begin to know if someone came up to me tomorrow and said, okay, so how do I get into romance writing, suspense writing, mystery thriller? I would be at a loss, because I'm actually really grateful for the system that I went through. It took me a long time to find an agent. And then, Dangerous Ground is my first front list traditionally published book. The rest are self-published, and that process, of trying to find an agent and then going out on submission. I mean, it made me such a better writer. I learned my craft in those years. I'm grateful for it. I mean, I would have loved to have sold more, but honestly, I think about it, like, especially the book that my agent signed me with. I mean, she spent months with me on polishing that book, and if I had been able to just which I could have at the time, I could have just turned around and self-published it, and I had friends that were doing that at the time and were quite successful with it. But I was like, well, I just got an agent. I'm not going to do that. I'm gonna go this process that I've been trying for so long. And she taught me so much. That year that I spent with her doing the revisions on that book, it changed how I write. And so it was worth it. It was worth every minute of that extra weight. It was because I just wanted. I mean, I want to write the best book I can for myself and my readers. I want to love what I'm doing. So it's worth it. But yeah, I wouldn't.
A lot of people don't realize, unless you. I think a lot of people don't realize how much time goes into the revision process, not just writing the draft, but just the revisions can take so long. So the back end of the book can be as long and time consuming as the front part.
Yeah. It's although I have to say I appreciate the hindsight. I'm 20 books in now, and man, I can revise a book a whole lot faster. You do get better at all the steps, all the phases.
Yeah, necessity.
Yeah. So of your stories, I know that you've written another attorney, at least one other, maybe more. And I know that your Tracers series, you're often looking at, okay, what type of forensic job do I want to explore with this? And I know as an archaeologist, one of the approaches that I take to some of my books is I'll be like, okay, what type of archaeology do I want to surprise people with? Because again, archaeology has so many different paths and avenues that you can be studying and working on, and the reasons we do the work is people just are often really surprised by. And so I will look at, okay, what do I want to teach readers about today? and then I'll start doing the research and everything. Do you find that you are doing that research to find your plot, where you're like choosing what type of forensics are we going to dive deep into with this book, or writing another attorney and the type of law? And I'm just curious how, if the research, it's a chicken and egg question as far as how you decide on the path for the project.
Yeah. Well, I usually start with the profession of the heroine, like if it's going to be, maybe someone in a forensic role or whatever she's going to be doing. And then I like to research what they do, and then also kind of reach out to people that have that job and interview them. And that might be where my journalism background comes in, because I really love to interview people. So I'll find someone that has that job of the character that I'm writing, and I'll talk to them about their day-to-day, what are some misconceptions about their job, what are some challenges they have, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you in your job, what's the best thing that ever happened to you. And you get these kind of details that you can kind of weave into your story and make it feel a lot more realistic, because you have that kind of behind the scenes perspective. And so whatever the character is going to be doing, I try to find someone who has that job. And in the case of this one, luckily I have a good friend from childhood who's now an attorney, and she went from working for the prosecutor's office to now she's a defense attorney. So she's kind of worked both sides of the system, and she's been just a great resource with any kind of questions I have about legal stuff or courtroom stuff. But it's always kind of an insider's perspective.
No, that's great. That's great. Do you have plans to write more attorneys, or is it just whatever is feeling right next? Like you don't plan that far ahead?
Not right now.
Yeah.
I don't plan that far ahead. I kind of just take it book by book. When I'm writing a series, for example, I'm writing the Texas Murder Files series also right now, and I've got some characters that are already in the series that I probably will up and make into main characters, so I can kind of see a book or two ahead, but I don't plan too many books ahead, because it keeps it interesting if you can kind of switch your focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. So and I was wondering,
do you think you'll be writing any? Do you think you might write a character, a heroine that isn't an archaeologist, or do you prefer to kind of stick to that?
I've written at this point. I've written 4. No, 5. I think I've written 5 heroines who aren't archaeologists. Which and that's when the story chooses their profession. Where one, she's a CIA special activities division officer, and so that, and then another one was a CIA case officer. So those ones, they almost don't even count, because they were set within the world, but they were set up in existing characters in that world. In my evidence series, which the 12th book is about to come out, every book that has evidence in the title, the heroine is an archaeologist, or an anthropologist, or a forensic anthropologist, or forensic archaeologist or historian. So they all work in cultural history, cultural preservation, that kind of thing. But there's 3 books. There's Night Owl, Winter Hawk, and the next one, Broken Falcon, that is coming out, where the heroes all work for this organization called Raptor, hence the Raptor names in the books. And none of those heroines are actually archaeologists. And that sort of came about just as I was planning Winter Hawk. And then I realized, well, I want to write this heroine, but she doesn't quite fit with the rest of the setup of the series. And so then I was like, well, but I could do this little spin-off. And I ended up just folding them into the series, but changing the name convention, and it's worked well, and readers can find it. But I am actually planning on doing another spin-off series, that's more about the fact that it's a 12-book long series, and you need to give readers a new entry point. I mean, even though they all stand alone, and they can be read out of order, there's a little bit of overlap with some of the things that happen to some of the characters, and so readers, they if they really want to start at book 1, they're afraid to start the series, as I'm sure you've experienced with Tracers, and in your other series, and so I'm going to do a spin-off. And I actually think that all the heroines in that one will be archaeologists. So I will be sticking with that part of my brand. But I think that the heroes are going to be active duty military, as opposed to some of the heroes were previous military, but no one is active duty. And so I think that's going to be like the tipping point between the new spin-off series but we'll see. I might come up with a different variable, but that's where I am right with it, because I know the first book. I know who the heroine and the hero are.
Yeah, I totally hear you about such a thing as a series getting a little bit too long for the reader.
Yeah, you need to make a safe place for them to enter. Are you connecting any, like, is the Texas murder files, is that connected to any of to Tracers, or is it just completely separate? Or did you lose sound? Okay.
I lost sound for a moment.
Oh, okay. So I was asking if the Texas murder files, if it is that all connected to Tracers, or if it's just straight up new to.
Yeah, this one is a completely independent series. And the only thing it has in common with Tracers is that it's set in Texas, which most of the Tracers. But other than that, it's completely different characters, different plot connecting them. So it's been kind of fun to do something completely different, just to kind of start fresh with new people, new places. It's been fun.
So that actually brings me to Last Scene Alone is a standalone, and you've only got a few standalones, correct? So do you have any plans?
That's right.
Would it be perhaps Antonio?
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Well, you're the first person to ask me that, because the book just came out, so it usually takes people a while to catch up and start asking me, is this character going to have a book? I don't have plans for a follow-up to this book, standalone. So, but who knows? I never say never, because just when you say no, I'll never do that, then people start asking for something, and then you start thinking, well, maybe I could, think about doing it. So, so this one's a standalone as of now. Okay.
You had cut out a little bit there in the middle, and so at one point I thought you said yes, that you were planning a sequel. So it'll be interesting to see what we all hear when this is over. You don't know it, you just committed. We can edit it. No, that's great. I mean, I totally I every once in a while I do think about, like, doing a standalone. I've got 2 standalones, and one of which was the first book I ever wrote that I had edited so heavily. And I actually had planned the sequel from the moment I wrote it. And I, I still get emails, when are you going to write Jason and Simone's story? I mean, it's so obvious I set up the sequel. I set it up completely. Yeah. And I want to write it. But I just, who has time? and so then, so it would actually be fun to sneak off and just sort of write a random standalone though and kind of surprise people with it. No expectations. She doesn't even have to be an archaeologist.
All those orphan characters.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's see.
One of the things that I'm loving about your series, the Fiona Carver books, is that it looks like you're going to be able to use all kinds of settings because her job is so flexible. You can go from Alaska to the Caribbean, you could go down to South America. It just sounds like it has so many possibilities.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I was
thinking about when you're writing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, and he's a wildlife photographer, so he goes everywhere, and I really had fun putting that together. Here, my cat's escaping. Okay. And so, yeah, that's actually, so for me, I have to know the setting before I can start plotting the book. I mean, sometimes I'll have the characters like, say it's a book that's the second in a series featuring the same couple, it was like, okay, well, I know the characters, but I really have to have the setting. And because setting is a character, it just straight up, it sets the baseline for everything because I am writing about cultural history. I mean, when archaeology is such a primary component, so where they are matters because it's also when they are and what the book that's set in the Caribbean, I have to talk about colonization and the devastation it wrought in the Caribbean because she's actually working on a fort. It's a fort that was built by the Spanish and the Dutch, and there's Kalinago people who are the last indigenous pre-Columbus culture that exists in the Caribbean. They live on the island of Dominica. And my fictional island is part of Dominica, the Commonwealth, and so I brought in some characters. So I have some characters that are Kalinago, and I have them on scene talking to a Jamaican archaeologist and talking about their cultural shared history of enslavement and the atrocities that were committed. And so I can't ignore that. I'm writing a book that's set in this place, and that's actually what they're studying. And so it was. I was really glad that I had a chance to explore that and show that, and at the same time just get to explore this another island setting. I had a lot of fun with the going from an Aleutian island to a Caribbean island, and bring in that cultural context, the history, and show and what it means now, and why we need to care about history now, and have so that's always my starting point, is figuring out what's next.
Well, that's how your passion really comes through in your story. It's clear from that the character is so passionate about her work, and you feel like the author is too. So it just kind of brings a lot of heart to your story.
Oh, thank you.
And I think it's great that your setting is really a character because it's so intrinsic to your plot. I mean, I guess you can't even start until you know where it's going to be.
Really, yeah, because there's nothing there. Yeah, because then I need to know what they're going to be dealing with, culturally speaking too. So there's actually one thing I wanted to mention that is part of it's the audiobook that for Dangerous Ground that I'm really delighted by is I asked for dual narration, which they gave me, and I have A.T. Chandler and Eva Kaminsky as the narrators for the audiobook. They did a fantastic job, male and female point of view. But I also have one scene, and it's a small scene, but it's an important scene that's written from the point of view of a Unaga woman, and I might be pronouncing it wrong. I practice it a lot. Unaga. She is a native Alaskan from the Aleutian Islands. There's a scene from her point of view, and so I asked Brilliance Audio if they could cast a voice actor who was Unaga. And they had to work very hard. It's a tiny community. It's a very small community. They worked very hard to find someone who could do it, but they did. And I really appreciated that Brilliance, believes in accurate representation, and I was super honored that Michelle Yachmaneff, that she read the scene, and it just meant so much to me to know that they worked hard to find the right person to read the scene. And the next book has some scenes from my Jamaican archaeologist point of view, and they have cast a Jamaican woman to read those scenes. And I'm just so thrilled. I just think that's fantastic to have it actually be in the voice of,
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
That's great news. And you don't hear that all the time. It wasn't until a few books ago that I didn't at all in who the narrator was going to be, and they're really listening to you. That's great. Yeah. Now I'm going to go back to this audiobook.
They do a great job. It's I listen to audiobooks all the time. So that was one reason why it was really important to me to have, and I listen to my own audiobooks. I'm weird. I'm one of those weird authors who I actually love listening to my own audiobooks because it's somebody else reading my book and it's not my voice. Yeah. And although that is when I notice, like, oh, why didn't I edit that sentence? I always hear all the, the repetitions and, oh, I shouldn't have said it that way. But anyways, I still enjoy listening. And so it was really fun to get to hear this book, because it was just so different, and to have the accurate representation just made me really happy. But do you like audiobooks? Do you enjoy them?
I do. I don't listen to them as much as I used to because I'm no longer commute. I used to commute to take my kids to and from school, and we moved, and so I'm not commuting like that anymore. And so I don't listen to as much as I used to, but I read ebooks a lot. I kind of tuck an e-reader into my bag wherever I'm going. So I kind of always have them in hand.
I'm going to grab my cat and make her say hi. Because she's, yes. Oh.
What's her name?
This is Malala.
Oh.
You say hi, Malala.
She likes to hang out with you while you write.
She does. It's been interesting because, we had a lot of family home for about a year and a half. And so all of her patterns changed because she used to hang out with me because I was the only one home during the day. And then, and then everybody was home. And so, exactly. But as of a week ago, we're now empty nesters. It's really weird our son just started college, and our daughter returned for her senior year. They're at the same school, which is really sweet, actually. It's nice. And so now the cat is all over me again. She's like, all right, I got nobody.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Well, I have a Weimaraner, this large dog that loves to be in my office and sometimes even sleep on my feet when I'm working. And I think it's great to have a pet because they get you they can be a good distraction. I know that my dog gets me up out of my chair, throughout the day. So they kind of, take a break, get some fresh air, good. And we've all loved pets during the pandemic, for sure.
Yes, for sure. It's definitely, the whole I'm going to just assume that the pandemic changed your writing habits and practices
Yeah.
out of necessity.
Yeah, I mean, just having, everybody home, everybody working from home, having to carve out space. I started working with headphones on, so that I could listen to music and kind of block out all the goings on in the house that were not
Oh, wow.
necessarily conducive to concentration. But the good news is I've kind of developed the ability to kind of work amid a lot of noise. So now, not that I'm going to coffee shops as much as I used to, but eventually I hope to go back and do some of the, I used to work at coffee shops, cafes near my house, stuff like that. But, I think we'll all get back into that groove at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never been able to work at a coffee shop. I mean, I've gone there because I've been like, oh, this will be fun. And then I get so distracted. I'm just like, no, I want to, and so, yeah. So I don't do that. But I definitely wasn't used to having everyone in my house. And I also started using headphones, but I started using them very, very specifically. I had to get some noise canceling headphones. And I'd put those on and I would listen to the Master and Commander soundtrack, which is 59 minutes long. And I learned, like, when the strings would play, I would know that I was 31 minutes into it. And basically I would do 1 hour writing blocks to the Master and Commander soundtrack with noise canceling so that no one could disturb me. And I got so much writing done. I mean, I think it's probably changed how I write. Plus, I'm mostly able to play that soundtrack now, but I'm not a musician. But I do recommend it if you like instrumentals. It's that the fact that it's just this nice little compact hour, it really helps. Because that's about all I can do, unless, like, in a straight sitting, unless it's really flowing. Like if it's because often I would get to the end of that hour, but I'd hit the groove, and so I'd blow past it. But then there were other times when it was like, I'm almost there, and so I'd know, okay, it's coming up. I get a break soon. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I can't. Oh, is this John? Is he gonna have some questions for us, maybe?
Yeah, but finish what you were saying. Go ahead.
Oh, but I also we were talking about how we learned to listen to music while we worked during the pandemic, and I was also saying that I don't like to listen to music that has words in it. I like instrumentals because they kind of interfere. Words kind of interfere with the words you're writing. So I prefer jazz or maybe world music or something that doesn't.
Okay, so we do have a few questions from the crowd. Mariah mentioned how, Laura, a lot of your characters have, law enforcement backgrounds. So can you talk a little bit about what research you do into kind of the police procedure stuff?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I think I mentioned before that I started out as a newspaper reporter, and in that job, I spent time, depending on what stories I was working on, I might have to interview cops, investigators, even, the public information officers at the police departments. And so I kind of got into the habit of just not being timid about interviewing law enforcement people. And so then when it started writing fiction, I just started to reach out to people. I've done police ride-alongs, and I have a friend who's in the FBI who has put me in touch with different FBI people over the years, depending on what kind of story I'm writing. So, it's just fun to kind of, if I kind of cross paths with someone who's in law enforcement, to kind of pick their brain a little bit. And then if I have a specific thing that I'm researching, for example, I was doing some forensic research, and so I interviewed somebody who does like fingerprint examination for the FBI, and that was fascinating to hear some of his, experience. So I just reach out to somebody in the field and kind of hear more about what they do.
And how about you, Rachel? What is your research process like, especially since you're an archaeologist and you're writing about a character who is? How much research factors into it?
Usually it's the setting requires the most intensive research. Fortunately, as far as the type of archaeology, usually I can turn to my husband or other archaeologists I know and ask if they can put me in touch with someone who, you know, is familiar with that type of work or something along those lines. And so usually it's not too hard for me to find people as the source, but the history and the background can be harder. I watch a lot of documentaries, you know, and you know, go through YouTube, just, you know, because I wrote a book that was set in South Sudan. And South Sudan has been in, you know, the middle of civil war just as of a few years after they became the world's youngest democracy. And I really wanted to know exactly what the roads were like, and everything I'd seen was talking about Juba, and everything that I was talking about like a super, you know, out there area. And, you know, you search and you search and you search, and someone's going to post a picture online, which is amazing to me. there's a video somewhere, and so yeah, I do a lot of just dives into setting, looking for, well, starting with, you know, like South Sudan. At least there were news articles that I could start with, and then working my way down to, you know, what it's like to live there now. And
so Mariah also says she loves you both and has read all of your books. Rachel, you mentioned, you know, being hesitant to give people advice about things like querying and things like that because it's changed so much. And Cory Doctorow, I think, just did like a blog post basically pretty recently that said, like, hey, don't ask these people that have been in the industry forever for like specific advice about that because things just change so fast. So, but she does want to know, what kind of advice would you offer to an aspiring romance writer?
Well, I mean, the tried and true advice of, you know, finding the authors that you love and looking at their work for what works for you, and then try to, you know, for me, I always try to write the book I want to read. And so I think that you know, if you're sitting down to write a book, the first thing you have to be asking yourself, you know, with everything you're doing is do you want to read this? You know, do you want to read this? Because then you're going to actually put all the things you love, and it's totally okay to put everything you love in your first book. There's a woman who she studies popular fiction, and she I don't know, Laura, if you ever saw her talk at RWA about idless. And you know, if you put things in a scene that is something that you love, it also is going to resonate with readers in the same way. Anyways, I'm forgetting her name. Oh, Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Anyways, my first advice is to find a book by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. and because I think she was coming out with one, and break down what she says. She's brilliant.
So good. Those YA books that she's been writing have been fantastic. Laura has just popped back in, so we're gonna okay. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh,
sorry, it just dropped.
Okay. And so Laura, what advice would you give for an aspiring writer?
I think the most important advice is to just keep trying and not give up, because this industry is just really packed with rejection at first, and you have to just be persistent. So if you really think you have a book inside you and you really want to write it, you know, get it down and be persistent, and don't be afraid to, again, if your first book isn't successful, just keep working, developing your craft, and keep writing, and write the next book and the next book. I know some very successful authors that didn't get published in their first few books. It took several books. So don't give up, and just, you know, be persistent.
Absolutely.
Okay, and almost last question. We'll do one more after this, but my disclaimer is you're not allowed to mention each other's books because we've established that you guys both read each other and are both fans. But what is something that you have read lately that you loved? Let's start with Rachel.
This might be cheating, but I have to say, Toni Anderson's Cold as Ice just came out last week, and I love everything she writes, and I love this book. It's a little gut wrenching because it's a character who's suffered a lot in a previous book, and she gets her happily ever after. It's a great suspense plot, and it's set in Alaska, which is a setting I'm fond of. So Cold of Ice by Toni.
Yeah.
And how about you, Laura?
Well, speaking of ice, I just finished a book by Ruth Ware, and it was called One by One, and it's a suspense story that's set in the French. These people go away for a corporate retreat, and there's an avalanche, and they get trapped in this beautiful chalet, and there of course there's a murder, and it's one of these locked in a room mysteries where they're locked together in this avalanche. They're trapped, but they know somebody is the murderer. You spend the whole story trying to figure out who did it. It's great. But I love Ruth Ware. She writes these really great thrillers. So
yeah, it's fun to see the way that she kind of takes a lot of like classic mystery tropes and Gothic tropes and kind of transforms them into kind of like contemporary thrillers. We're all big fans too. And I know you guys both mentioned it briefly while you were chatting, but just to recap for everybody, can you each tell everybody what you've got coming up next? I know, Laura, you just had a book out yesterday, but can you tell everybody a little bit about what you've got coming up next?
Yes. My next book that I'm doing is going to be book 3 in the Texas Murder Files series. So it's called Midnight Dunes, and it's set on the Texas coast on an island, and it's another suspense story. And so if you read the last book, Flight, you'll recognize some of the characters from that story. It's called Midnight Dunes. It comes out next May, I believe.
And how about you, Rachel?
On October 22nd, I have Broken Falcon coming out, which is the 12th book in my evidence series. And as much as I usually say all my books stand alone, they do, and they are written to stand alone. You could pick up this book and you would get it. This one is the character more than any other has played an important role in multiple books. So a lot of readers are waiting for Chase's story. So that's Broken Falcon, and then after that, in January 4th, I have Crash Site, which is the sequel to Dangerous Ground coming out. So.
All right, so I think that is going to about do it for us this evening. So just to recap, for anyone who might have joined us late, we've been chatting with Laura Griffin, whose newest book, Last Seen Alone, just came out. And she's been chatting with Rachel Grant, whose newest release was Dangerous Ground, that came out in August. If you missed any part of our chat, once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it, so you'll be able to go back and rewatch from the beginning. You'll also be able to check out all of the other author events. We've chatted with Laura a couple of times throughout the pandemic, so you can also check out those previous ones. We've got copies of both authors' books. You can visit us at murderbooks.com. We dropped a link early in the chat for more info about the books. And I think that's going to do it for the evening. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I enjoyed this a lot.
Oh, good. You guys take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.